Hello everyone, David here. This is the Surface Go 2 from Microsoft. It's not my first Surface product, but it is my favourite because of the form factor and because it's very light. You can throw it in your bag, kind of forget about it. But then you've got a Windows 10 machine on the move. And particularly if you're travelling abroad, it means you have a very versatile machine that you can take with you and it doesn't weigh down your suitcase too much. Now, I've already established in a previous video that it can do video editing, just about, if you're willing to accept a few caveats in DaVinci Resolve. And I know it will be able to do some fairly simple things like web browsing, media consumption, and light development. So it just leaves the question, how well does it play games? Let's find out. So I bought the version with the Core M3 processor. It's a little bit quicker and it can actually turbo up to 3.4 gigahertz, but generally it runs at a much slower speed, sort of 1 to 1.5 gigahertz. And it also depends how hot it's getting. So if you could keep it cool, it means you might squeeze a little bit more performance out of it. I paid £744 for the tablet and the keyboard in a bundle, and they gave me a mouse for free with that as well, which I don't intend to use, but I'll probably give it away to a friend. Then I paid £80 for the SD card for half a terabyte and £84 for the Surface Pen, which means altogether I paid £908 for this package. But I'm pretty pleased with what I'm getting for my money, because then I'm getting a full computer and then a pretty nice keyboard for typing on. It is small, you have to be quite delicate and careful when you're typing, but it's still way better than an on-screen keyboard. And then the whole feature of tablet mode and writing with the pen, and I'm finding I'm using OneNote quite a lot to make notes. And one feature, or little sort of touch that they added that I really like, is that when you have the keyboard folded around to the back, it just exposes the camera. So you don't need to detach the keyboard if you want to take a picture. You can just fold it over and you still have the camera free to take pictures or record a video. And that's something that the iPad didn't do with its standard folio. If you wrap the folio around the outside, it covered the camera, and then it meant you had to fold it a little bit extra or just take it off completely. So I like some of the little touches they have with this machine. It feels like a very thoughtful device, and it makes it really fun to use. A cool accessory that I just happened to have already was this USB-C to 3-port dongle. I actually bought it to work with my Switch, but it works perfectly with the Go. Plug it into the Go there, and then you can charge it through the USB-C port, which passes through the power. Then you get HDMI and a USB-A port on the other side. And I've just found this really useful. And the cool thing is that if I take my Nintendo Switch with me on holiday, I can take my Go with me as well, and they'll share the same adapter and ports and chargers and everything. This does raise the question, can I put my Go into my Nintendo Switch dock? Well, the answer is you can put it in, but you don't get a display output. Okay, let's try out some games. Now, I've installed most of mine to the external SD card. That does mean that it'll be a bit slower to read them, because I benchmarked the internal SSD and got pretty good scores. And I benchmarked an external SD card, and even though it was one of the faster cards, the V30 or U3 ones, it got much slower access speeds. For comparison, I also benchmarked an external USB portable hard drive and got even slower scores than the SD card. So yeah, I'm aware loading times might be a bit higher than I would like, but at least I've got the storage space to put them. If your games are not that big, then you might be able to get away with installing a few of them to the SSD. First game I want to play is Streets of Rage 4. Now, I'm a massive Mega Drive Sega fanboy, or at least I was in the 90s. I still am. And I played all of the Streets of Rage games on my Mega Drive. So I have played a bit of Streets of Rage 4 on my Nintendo Switch and on my desktop PC, and it's awesome. So let's see how well it holds up on the Surface Go 2. Okay, solid 60 frames a second on the intro sequence. Advanced options, oh, you get loads of options. Okay, so under advanced options, you can change resolution scaling, graphics quality. I'm gonna leave them all on high for now. A few little bumps in the frame rate while the text is scrolling. Okay, on my desktop PC it just loaded like pretty much instantly. Here it's taking a little while longer to load the game, but it wasn't actually that long. Up and jump, by the way, if you want to land on your feet when you're thrown. Learned that one back in the day. Okay, well, Streets of Rage 4 gets a thumbs up from me. Really great frame rate, totally playable, and it looks great on the Surface Go 2, so check it out. And it's an awesome game as well. Next, I want to try a title that I don't really play. I'm certainly not going to be very good at it, but I'm aware it's very popular and contemporary. Fortnite. Let's give it a blast. It was a huge download at 76 gigabytes, so this would barely fit on your SSD if it was the only thing installed. I've got it installed to the SD card, so hopefully it isn't going to have to read, you know, gigabytes and gigabytes of data just to get started. One thing I do really like about this setup is that it's completely fanless, so the machine is silent, and if you were traveling somewhere and you needed to be playing quite quietly, you could have, you know, some speakers on very quietly and still only get the sound from the game, which is pretty cool. Okay, well, the menus are running at a pretty decent 30 frames a second, so that's a good sign. Doesn't mean it's going to work nicely when we get in game. I can tell there's seriously some like decrease in the resolution, because even though the menus are in sort of quite sharp, what looks like my monitor's native 1080p, I can see there's loads of aliasing on the character, and it's obviously been scaled up, so I think the 3D resolution is set quite low. But you know what? I'm more concerned about the frame rate and performance than visual quality right now. Okay, so yeah, a lot of these settings are on kind of their lowest options. And yeah, 3D resolution at 44%. How do you thank the bus driver? Okay, and there are some really obvious graphical artifacts where things are being drawn in front of other things when they should be behind them, coupled with very strange behavior just when you try and walk up an incline. And these weird graphical effects, whatever is going on there, this is not a great experience. It's kind of impressive that they've got it to run at this sort of frame rate, but I wouldn't want to play a game like this for long. Okay, that wasn't a great experience. The frame rate was all over the place. There were loads of glitches in controlling my character, and also just sort of graphical things, like some weird tearing appearing on screen. So I wouldn't recommend you try and play Fortnite on the Surface Go 2. I think it makes more sense to look at slightly older games, and games that were made for like a cartoony or drawn style, like Streets of Rage 4, which worked. Dead or Alive 5 is an interesting one. It's quite an old fighting game at this point, about 8 years old. It came out in 2012. And I thought it might run well on the Go 2, and it kind of does. If you leave the configuration options on their defaults, you're getting something like 1080p with shadows and anti-aliasing, and the game runs in slow motion because it doesn't want to drop any frames. And as a result of that, it feels like you're sort of fighting in mud. If you drop those settings down to about 720p, turn off shadows and anti-aliasing completely, you get quite a playable experience. Sometimes dropping to less than 60 frames a second, but still, it works quite well. So what about an older but massive, very popular, brilliant game, Grand Theft Auto 5? Yeah, it's definitely worse when you have like a wide city view and there's a lot more for it to draw. Then you can get frame rates sort of going like sub 10 frames a second, and that's pretty painful. But if you're in an area where there isn't a huge amount going on screen, then it gets a lot more playable.
I robbed banks. I ran whores. I smuggled dope.
And you consider them achievements?
So my final verdict is that the game is playable in places, but if you're in a kind of city scene and there's a lot going on and there's a lot visible, you're going to end up with kind of less than 10 frames a second, maybe for quite a long time. And that's going to make the game quite difficult to play, if nothing else. So I wouldn't really recommend you play it on this system. It is possible, and if you were desperate to play Grand Theft Auto 5 for some reason, you could probably just about do it. But I think you should either find a different game or a different system.
There is nothing, only warm primordial blackness.
You've been here for 3 days, on official police business, no less.
So a game that came out quite recently was Disco Elysium. It's a point-and-click role-playing game. It's very funny, very well written, and it is kind of drawn in a like hand-drawn style, like a sprite-based game, but it's definitely 3D rendered. So let's see how well that runs on the Surface Go 2.
Hello, sweetie. You shouldn't keep your colleague waiting.
Okay, so my verdict on Disco Elysium is that you can make it playable. If you set all of the detail settings to their lowest and the resolution down as well, then you can get it to tick over at about 20 frames a second most of the time. And due to the nature of the gameplay, it being sort of point and click, then you don't really need like twitchy, fast feedback in order to play it. It's a more thoughtful game. However, I do think like it deserves better than this. It's a really gorgeous game when you have all of the graphic detail settings set to high, and I kind of feel like it should really be played on a more powerful system if you want to appreciate it. But if you're desperate to play it, it works.
Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
So what about everyone's favourite game to buy multiple times? It's Skyrim. It runs. If you turn the detail settings down to their lowest and also set the resolution to 720p or something in that area, it's kind of playable. It gets a bit hectic in the busy scenes, like the intro cinematic with the big dragon flying around, but the rest of it is like pretty playable. And considering you spend a lot of your time just like in caves, I think it's going to work out okay. So if you can push through the bits with low frame rates, the rest of it is pretty good.
That dragon doesn't give up easy.
Grab everything important and let's move.
Okay, what about something like Fez? It's a little bit of an older game, but it definitely did something in 3D, because when you transition the level around, definitely did some 3D switching there. So let's find out. Oh, this is very good. Yep, so Fez runs extremely well. Go for it. Okay, so this should be an interesting one. Pyre, which came out in 2017. It's definitely got some 3D elements in it, but I think most of it is kind of like a book-based point-and-click adventure, and I'm quite interested to know how it'll run on the Surface Go 2. The only display options you get are resolution, so no like detail changes. So let's try it on something lower, like 720p for now. Okay, so this game is interesting because it has, you know, this kind of like story section of the game, and then a totally separate, almost sports-like action part of the game where you have to score points. And actually, both are running okay when you set the resolution down to 720p. So I think this just about gets a pass on Surface Go 2, although It's not super smooth, and I wish I could play it in a higher resolution, but there you go.
The rite is complete. There, dear reader. Now you understand.
How about an MMO like Star Trek Online?
It should boost our signal sufficiently to inform the freighters of the danger and warn the colony.
Okay, it took a long time to patch, but I guess that's MMO life, right? What's quite interesting is they separate the settings into CPU and GPU, so if you know you're CPU limited or GPU limited, you can adjust accordingly. Okay, setting it to 720p and setting the render quality and graphics detail to the minimum managed to make it a usable frame rate in the front end, so let's see how it works in-game. Yeah, so this is running surprisingly well. Star Trek Online totally gets a pass.
Borg landing craft detected nearby. Captain, there are civilian ships engaging them.
I believe I can send a message to those ships.
Okay, I could keep testing games forever, and I'm slightly tempted to, but we have to wrap this video up sooner or later. So, is the Surface Go 2 any good at gaming? Well, kind of. In the right situation, it's all right. So if you pick your games carefully and say, find something that's an old game, or something that uses 2D graphics, or simple 3D graphics, or semi-modern game with 3D graphics, but you can turn the detail settings right down, then you're going to get something that kind of works. Also, I've noticed it does get pretty toasty, so if you can get a cooling fan on it to keep it cool or cool it some other way, you might get a bit more performance that way. And I'm looking forward to the Linus Tech Tips video about water cooling the Surface Go 2. For me, this is just a great device because I love taking notes with the Surface Pen, and I love having a full Windows 10 PC on the move. And if you think you're in a similar situation, then this could work out for you as well. But just don't expect to play Cyberpunk 2077 on it anytime soon. If you're curious about seeing other games running on a multitude of Surface devices, then check out the subreddit Surface Gaming. They've got loads of people there sort of posting videos and posting reports on what runs well and what doesn't. If you post a request, probably someone will try it out for you if you're thinking of buying that device. I'm quite looking forward to some incremental improvement in the Surface Go 3. I hope we get faster CPU, better GPU, and really we need more storage. 128 gigs is just not enough in 2020. I really want to see a 512 gigabyte option. And if you're yelling at the screen right now and saying, well, just get a Surface Pro instead, I mean, yeah, fair enough, but it's a bit bigger, it's a bit heavier, and it's more expensive. And I really like the form factor of the Go, so I'd like to stick with a machine more like this. But yeah, if you're in a similar situation and you just want more power, the Pro is obviously an option for you as well. Okay, I hope this video was useful. If so, please hit the like button down there, and you can help me out by subscribing to my channel as well. Okay, see you next time.